Jerry, the main reason I got in touch with you for this interview today is that I know you held your AGM last week, as I saw the AGM covered on a New York TG Car report.
Yeah.
I admit, Jerry, that when I saw you on New York TG Car last weekend, that it was the first time I saw you in the national media in Ireland in a long time.
Yeah.
Because you've had a very eventful career as a GP and also as a public representative, haven't you, Jerry?
I, true, Dan. Absolutely true, indeed. Yeah, and we're all on the treadmill of life, and thanks be to God, it's great to be able to be alive and to do something, and maybe work with others to try and make things better for everybody. That's really what it's all about. It's about family, and it's about supporting each other. And if it's not about that, I don't know what it's about. When I started, I came here as a young GP. I had no idea what lay in store for me. I came here just to get into the system because the deal was if you could work in a rural area on an offshore island, for instance, then you could get the plum job in Galway because you'd proven your work, and they didn't feel they were appointing someone that they shouldn't appoint and that you would be good at your job because you had the experience. But when I came here, I discovered that life just took me by the coattails, and I just was taking a break as I thought it from the discos in Galway and all that as a young fella. But I really was knocked for two when I discovered people needed to see me more oftentimes as a person rather than as a doctor with all these qualifications and all these years of training. So that opened my eyes, and that was put me on the road when I realised really what I was born to do, and I'm glad to do it, and I'm still doing it, thank God.
And you were a TD around 20 years ago, weren't you, Jerry?
I was from 2002 to 2007, absolutely, and I did that because I was supporting a local hospital, our local hospital here, because we needed orthopedics, and people were going down to Galway on the road, and they ended up sometimes not doing very well indeed because somebody that was very, very ill, desperately ill, would have to go to Galway to have, say, a hip replaced or something like that. So I stood just to get progress on things like our Mayo orthopedic unit, and certainly we got that. And for that to happen, we needed to get phase two of our hospital, which would include an orthopedic unit. And I was glad that all that happened. And then, of course, when I was there in the Dáil, of course, all the things were happening, such as everything that happened down in Ballinrobe and all of the rest of it. But I was glad to be there to support people. I was an independent.
Yeah. And I know you're talking to me today in your capacity as spokesperson for your association, but you were very involved in Shelter Sea 20 years ago, weren't you?
I was indeed. I was indeed. I was quite involved in that because they were my constituents. They were lovely people, and I discovered when I went out to see them that somebody was going to put a pipeline between their front door and their house, the front gate in their house. Like, if that happened to any of us, we would be absolutely uh, very annoyed about that, to say the least. A high velocity pipeline coming in from the sea at high velocity, high pressure. So it just didn't bear thinking about from the sea where the gas was being piped right to the terminal where it would be processed. And just that just didn't make sense that it went through people's village and Westport. So to me, it was really was astounding that anybody would try and do all that. So I ended up actually getting them moved, thanks be to God, in the campaign with everybody else. And what's more, getting the pipeline situated elsewhere, and ended up with probably one of the safest pipelines that you could possibly have in such a situation. So I'm very pleased about all of that. And, the rest is history. Wonderful, lovely, lovely people who were incarcerated in Clover Hill for a long time, just because they were standing up for the right to live in their own area with safety. And I was delighted, and I felt very privileged to support them and all of that. So
Oh,
all that is water on the bridge now, but thanks be to God, we live to tell the tale, and it's just been it was great pleasure to be able to help those people and all the wonderful people who supported them all over Mayo and from all over Ireland and beyond, it has to be said.
all right, cool. Okay, Jerry, we'll move on. If you were to give me a summary of how you think your AGM went last week and what was discussed at it, what would you say?
Well, I'd say it was good, Darren, because this was our 38th annual conference, believe it or not. And it started off, I have very lucky because when I came to Mulranny, I met my good lady, and that was really a major reason why I never left. And I also met some other people, like, for instance, older people, as I said to you, that needed even more as a person and as a doctor. So I got involved in supporting them locally. And with the day centre, first of all, which is a bridge to their isolation and their loneliness. But then finally, they had to leave when they could no longer live in the community by themselves. So I got involved in sheltered housing, and then I got involved in a high support unit so people could move sideways where they needed high support. So the guarantee was, no matter how old or able you are, you can stay locally. And we've been doing that for 30 years, supporting older people to stay locally in our St. Brendan's village. And that's a good story. And that's the other side of the rural doctors, because rural doctors are in a very good position to help people. And people of rural Ireland, no more than people in inner city and so on, sort of the art people in community. Community, no matter where you find it, is wonderful. And, people, I was involved in supporting the National Federation of Group Water Schemes. In fact, I was one of the co-founders, as well as a former chairman. As well as that, I was a former vice president of the Irish Council for Social Housing. So I was very much involved in meeting people in rural Ireland and supporting them, setting up group water schemes all over the 26 counties, and also building sheltered housing and day centres. So I discovered that there was a major potential in rural Ireland, and what's happening at the moment with people having to go, I call it the sad side of migration of older people to nursing homes. And yesteryear it was the county homes and it was the welfare homes, but nowadays it's the warehouses. So, but that doesn't happen in Mulranny. For the last 27 years, we have supported people locally, and we're the biggest local employer, and we have been for 27 years. So it's something that can be done, and it is very much a viable housing alternative, along a continuum of support to what has been envisaged for Ireland and what is happening in Ireland with nursing homes, and what's happening really, nothing wrong with nursing homes as such, but what's happening is they're just getting bigger and they're more like warehouses than community. And I think community has the potential and the power to look after older people. So that's really the other side of rural doctors. The rural doctors are there to do all these things. Okay.
Well, go on, yeah.
I was going to say that what really our situation is that there are lots of rural doctors that have had to leave because they're not been properly supported, and the worry is that people are suffering. The people in rural Ireland are suffering because they have to go further and further to find the services of a doctor, and oftentimes people just end up in the A&Es because a lot of out of hours now. Once 5 o'clock comes or 6 o'clock comes, you don't see a doctor. You just have to go out of hours, and too often people are just sent to the A&E. And there is a situation now where A&E in Castlebar is they're talking about having a strike on the 3rd of November, which is not too long away at all. And the reason is they're under such pressure. But I reckon that what's happening is people have to go to A&E because they need to see somebody when they're in trouble, and that's what's happening. So. What we were saying at our conference was that there should be 2 doctors in areas struggling to hold on to the rural GP. There should be 2 doctors there, because here in Mulranny, for instance, there's more than enough work for 2 doctors because we've had an influx of people. We've had about 150 Ukrainians who are extremely welcome because they're wonderful people who add greatly to the community. They do community employment with us, where it's often hard, oftentimes, to get enough people locally to do that. It has meant, though, more work for the GP. So there's loads and loads of work here. So there should be a second GP appointed. And considering that if there are a second GP appointed in those areas, well, then they can look after their older people locally, do what we're doing in St. Brendan's, and support people locally, so they don't have to go to a faraway nursing home, to a warehouse, as I call it, in a distant place on a greenfield site with no connection to community. They can be looked after for the community, by the community, locally, just like we do here in Mulranny. So there's no reason why that shouldn't happen. And a lot of times doctors are not going to rural areas because they cannot get their statutory leave. Now, who wants to go to an area where you kind of take your holidays and all of that. You kind of go to a family funeral, for instance, or maybe with a happy occasion like a wedding, for instance. So if you had 2 doctors appointed, and this was our call, that there would be 2 doctors appointed to those areas where they're struggling to retain their GP, and on the offshore islands. And you might say, well, that's going to cost a lot. But in fact, if you look at what's happening at the moment, there's loads of panels that are vacant, and the HSE, in fairness to them, have put in a locum there, which is like I call a stick and plaster solution. But if they were to put a second doctor there, it would mean that they would be able to recruit a second doctor who would ensure that each doctor could take their statutory leave. They could support the older people locally like we do here in Mulranny, and everybody would be happy. Because I don't want to go to a nursing home when I'm older and disabled and I can't look after myself. I would love to stay here locally in Mulranny, and there's no reason why not. And we have done it for 27 years here, so we've stood the test of time, and we've done it within the system. But with proper support, I believe every community could do this, and it's an alternative to the side immigration of older people. As I said to you, in yesteryear, they were going to the county home and the welfare home, and now they're going to the warehouse, as I call it. And I think that's unfair. I think people should have the chance to stay locally in their own community, and I believe rural doctors can do that with the support of government. There's no reason to suppose otherwise, because there was wonderful support there when the government was in trouble with group water schemes, when the EU was fining Ireland several million and potentially every day. The government was in serious trouble because the water was contaminated and they needed to do something about it. Who did they go to? They went to the communities. They went to the communities, and we set up the National Federation of Group Water Schemes. We got the government out of trouble. We set up water schemes. We actually ended up putting in new treatment plants, new piping, and ensuring that it was up to scratch. And from having the worst water in Europe, we had the best water in Europe. And that was all thanks to community with the support of government. So it's all about partnership, local authority, government and community. We can do so much together.
Okay, Jerry. I read the article last night from the Irish Independent from June of this year when the journalist Eilish O'Regan interviewed you. And just to follow on from what you're saying there, like in some parts of Ireland, of rural Ireland now, I think it even happens in some city areas as well. There are quote black spots, aren't there, when it comes to getting GPs? Are there?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm saying that what the Mulranny St. Brennan's village would work equally well in an inner city area. Whether you're a rural area or whether you're an inner city area, it's all about people and it's all about community. And I have many, many, many friends in GP that are involved in the Deep End, for instance. It's just a wonderful organisation. It's to say, I regard just the two ends of the spectrum. Rural areas, rural practice on the other end of the spectrum, then inner city areas. They're equally neglected oftentimes, and they're equally in need of support, and they equally deserve a proper standard of care, a proper standard of support, and to have a GP there. And the same thing is that I've spoken to many colleagues in inner city Dublin, and they've said to me, it's the same thing. People end up actually going to nursing homes for convalescence or even for long term. And they're so far from their own community that could support them if they had the proper support to do that. And the model is there. We give complete care in the community. We do much more than any nursing home can do. We support people at home with our Meals on Wheels, with our daycare, and then we have our sheltered housing, and then people can move sideways to our high support units. Not everybody needs to do that, but some do. So the guarantee is, no matter how old or disabled you are, you can stay in your own area. And how do we do that? Well, what we do is we do convalescent care. People can go back from hospital earlier, come back to their own community, their own area. People can have palliative care. So if people are dying, they needn't have to go to a hospice in Castlebar or anywhere else like that. They can stay locally and be looked after here in our high support unit. And the same thing, people for long-term care, they can stay locally. So the guarantee is that they can always stay locally. And also people that have short-term illnesses such as pneumonia or kidney infections or something like that, we can support them locally for self-limiting conditions that can be treated locally, such as pneumonia or urinary tract infections. We can put up IV lines and give people antibiotics, the same as we get in the hospital. Now, if they're having complications, or they're not well, or it's the appendix or something like that, well, after the hospital they go, but not otherwise. And we find that this is very, very rewarding for our community, and we're very proud of what we're doing, and we want to continue to do it. And what's more, we want to spread the word. We want other communities to do this as well, and with proper support, it can be done. And many people have done or tried to do the same as that, but on the top end of things, supporting people at the top end does require a lot of support. But and if that support is there, it's all possible. And everything we did here, we did in partnership with the local authority, with the community, and with the government, giving us the near to source the necessary funding to do that. And it is a formula, for a very good situation where community has really not been given the encouragement it deserves or the support it deserves. That's my opinion. Because when I started here, the HSE was doing maybe 76% of older persons' care. Now it's doing about 16%. So it's gone full circle. And what's happening now is the private sector is doing the majority of older persons' care. But to me, I think communities can do it better, because I think the support of older people is too important to be left just to the market. I believe what happens within is cherry picking, so that the big the providers will not set up in a place like Mulranny. They'll set up in the bigger centres where there's economy of scale and where they're cherry picking, in other words. So that means that these facilities will only be provided in the bigger centres. But there are people also living in the inner cities. There are people also living in rural areas. So this is the way that we can do it. Community can do it. And what's more, we've been the biggest employer for the last 27 years here, and we continue to be. And so it's a massive tool for rural regeneration, community regeneration, whether that's inner city or whether that's rural Ireland. It's all possible and it's all doable.
You're doing great work. Okay, Jerry, I read as well last night that the Minister for Health believes that in the year 2030 there will be a big increase nationally in the number of GPs in Ireland. Is this the case, Jerry?
Well, I think even what's been proposed at the moment, and there have been certainly increases in the number of people going into training, there will still not be enough GPs. That is the problem. And more than that, the number of older people, at the moment, we have the highest number of older people in Europe. We have the highest, people are living longest of all, and we have, relatively speaking, we have the highest number of older people. People 85 plus, that population, at the moment, half that population is in long-term care. So you will certainly need more GPs, but more than that, you will need more facility for older people. You will need more long-term care facilities. Now, the problem is at the moment that half the people, 85 plus, are in long-term care. So in the next 20 years, the number of people, 85 plus, is going to treble. So you can imagine the number of people that will be needing long-term care. Now, in Mayo and in Leitrim, we are the two counties with the highest dependency level, relatively speaking, of older people, and with the least number of long-term care beds. And in the west of Ireland and in the northwest in particular, Donegal and so on, all that area there, there was certainly a big need for long-term residential care, but there's just not provision for it. So I'm saying it's the two sides of the coin. If you support people in rural Ireland, if you support people in inner city Ireland with GPs, whether they be rural GPs or inner city GPs, if you do that, well, then there is the opportunity for people to stay locally. So what I'm saying, there's an entirely new way to look at it. The ESRI did a report last January, and they said that things are really going to get so much worse, and particularly they're going to get worse in rural areas, the west and the northwest of Ireland, because we, as I said to you, we had the high dependency level and we don't have the beds, we don't have the facilities. What I'm saying is community will give an alternative. And I said to you, I've seen it with the National Federation of Workforce Schemes, I've seen it with housing, I've seen it with sheltered housing, day centres, group order schemes. The people of rural Ireland are well capable of looking after the needs of rural Ireland with the people of rural Ireland. But if they got the same support as they did during the water crisis, because the government were in fear of the big fines from Europe, if we got that same support Even in this area here, the HSE would give 60% more support per resident per week than they give to us for our St. Brendan's, and no capital support, relatively speaking. But a level playing field would ensure that we would have GPs in rural Ireland who could keep our older people locally where people want to be, same in inner city, that we could support our local people in their own community, by community, for community, and be a massive tool for the regeneration of that community. So why not? I think it's all very, very doable. I think people should think more about this.